In 1932, a family of 5 in rural Oklahoma ate for an entire week on 37 cents. Not because they were clever, because they had no other choice. They ate things that would make your grocery cart look like a king's banquet. Potato peel soup, large sandwiches, a pot of beans stretched so thin the water ran clear. And here's the part nobody talks about. Some of those meals were the best food those families ever tasted, because hunger is the greatest cook there ever was. Number 17 on this list was eaten by over 2 million Americans who had never been poor a day in their lives before 1929. Number 8 was so filling and so cheap that Hoover's own government tried to push it into school cafeterias. And number 1, the dish that fed more Depression-era families than any other, is something most Americans under 40 have never heard of. These 30 dinners were not on menus. They were not in cookbooks. They were scratched in pencil on the backs of envelopes by mothers doing the impossible, feeding children when there was nothing left to feed them with. Some of those notes are small, some of them are recipes. They are records of survival and of quiet, fierce dignity. Hit subscribe before we start, because what these families knew about feeding people on nothing is worth more than anything in a meal kit delivery box. Let's count down the 30 most forgotten dinners in American history. Number 30, dandelion green salad. Before the Depression, dandelions were weeds. After it, they were lunch. Families across Appalachia and the rural South sent children into fields with paper bags to harvest the young, tender leaves before they turned bitter in the late spring heat. Wilted with hot bacon grease and a dribble of apple cider vinegar, dandelion greens became a side dish that cost exactly nothing. Mothers taught daughters which leaves to pick and which to leave. It was real botanical knowledge passed hand to hand out of necessity. Today, restaurants charge $14 a plate for the same thing and call it forage. Your great grandmother called it Tuesday. Number 29, cornmeal mush. Ground cornmeal simmered in salted water until thick. That was supper. It was poured hot into bowls with a spoonful of bacon drippings melting across the top. A 2 lb bag of cornmeal cost about 8 cents in 1934 and could feed a family of 4 for 3 dinners. The next morning, mothers sliced whatever had congealed in the pot and fried it in lard until the edges crisped golden. Nothing wasted. Oral histories from the Tennessee Valley speak plainly. Mush again tonight. The children never said anything. They ate. They knew. Number 28, fried salt pork. A side of salted fatback cost a few cents a pound, and it lasted weeks without refrigeration. Sliced thin and fried in cast iron, it crisped around the edges and filled the house with a smell that made mouths water before the table was set. The drippings in the pan became the base for gravy, the seasoning for beans, the fat for tomorrow's cornbread. Nothing in a Depression kitchen had just one job. Everything had 3. Families who kept salt pork in the smokehouse counted themselves lucky. Number 27th, poke salad. This one comes with a warning your grandmother would have known by heart. The leaves of the pokeweed plant are toxic raw, but Depression-era families across the Deep South knew exactly how to neutralize them. Boil the young leaves once, drain, boil again, and drain. Then fry them with onion and fatback, and you had a dish that tasted, as one Alabama woman remembered it, like spinach that had been through something. Poke grew wild in ditches and along fence rows impossible to kill. For families with no garden and no money, the ditch was the grocery store. You just had to know what to pick. Number 26, potato soup. Peel potatoes. Dice them. Boil with onion and water. Add a little flour to thicken. Season with salt. That was Depression potato soup. 3 or 4 nights a week in homes from Montana to Mississippi during the worst years. In 1933, a 10 lb bag of potatoes cost about 19. Potatoes were the Depression's foundation food, the reliable calorie when everything else ran out. Children remember the soup as thin and pale, but warm, always warm, in tin bowls that fogged with steam while wind pressed against the windows. Pinto or navy beans cooked soft and mashed warm, spread thick on a slice of homemade bread. That was lunch for millions of American school children during the Depression years. The beans provided protein. The bread provided bulk. The whole thing cost less than a penny per child. Teachers in rural schools across Kansas and Missouri described children arriving with bean sandwiches so heavy with filling that the bread was already wet through by noon. Nobody complained. Some children had nothing at all and watched the others eat. Number 24. Tomato gravy and biscuits. Here is where the Depression kitchen became something close to art. Fry a tablespoon of lard. Whisk in flour until golden. Pour in a can of tomatoes and stir until the gravy thickens and turns that deep rust red. Season with salt and pepper. Ladle it over split biscuits made from flour, lard, and water. A can of tomatoes ran about 9 in 1935. The whole pot cost under 15 cents and fed 6 people until they pushed back from the table. Something from almost nothing that tasted like it came from a kitchen that had everything. Number 23rd, egg drop soup, American style. This is not the restaurant version. This is the Depression version. Bring a pot of salted water to a boil. Crack 1 egg directly into it and stir. Add whatever you had, a limp celery stalk, a wilted carrot, a pinch of dried parsley. The egg cooked in white wisps through the broth, adding protein and richness to what was otherwise hot water. In households where eggs were carefully rationed, 1 egg in a pot of broth became supper for 3. Some mothers called it sick soup. Others just called it supper. Number 22. Grits with pot liquor. In the South, pot liquor was never thrown away. It was the dark, salty liquid left in the pot after cooking greens, dense with flavor from whatever vegetable had simmered down into it. Poured over a bowl of plain grits, it turned a near-empty supper into something that actually tasted like a meal. A 1934 survey of rural Southern families found that pot liquor appeared on the dinner table more than 5 times a week in the counties hardest hit by the Depression. It was not desperation. It was knowledge that the people who could afford to throw away the cooking water never bothered to learn. Number 21. Bread and milk. Tear stale bread into a bowl. Pour cold milk over it. Season with a pinch of salt or a spoonful of sugar. That was supper on the nights when there was simply nothing else. A loaf of bread cost about 7 cents. In 1933, 2 people could eat on the leftover heels and half a cup of milk. Mothers sometimes warmed the milk first. The essential poverty of the dish was unchanged, filling, cheap, and present on the table, which was the whole point. First pattern break. Here is what the history books leave out. During the worst years of the Depression between 1932 and 1934, the USDA paid farmers to destroy food. Millions of hogs were slaughtered and buried. Crops were plowed under. Fruit rotted on trees because the price of picking it exceeded what it would fetch at market. Meanwhile, in the cities, soup kitchen lines stretched around the block for hours. Children fainted at school from hunger. The same government that buried pigs was telling families to make do with bean soup. Some people never forgave that. Their recipes carry that anger in every line. Number 20. Hoover stew. Boil water. Add whatever canned goods you had. Canned tomatoes, canned corn, canned beans. Stir in macaroni. Simmer until thick. The name was meant as an insult, but the dish fed hundreds of thousands of people living in the Hoovervilles that spread outside every major American city in the early 1930s. An entire camp could be fed from a single large pot cooked over an open fire with ingredients scourged from back doors and charity boxes. Families who were middle class in 1928 and homeless by 1932 ate it on tin plates with bent forks and remembered it, some of them, for the rest of their lives. Number 19. Crackers and milk. A sleeve of soda crackers cost about a nickel. Crumbled into a bowl with cold milk, they dissolved into a paste that was filling without much pleasure, but with enough bulk to silence the stomach for a few hours. Urban families, suddenly poor after the stock market wiped out decades of savings, found themselves eating crackers and milk for dinner and pretending to their children that it was a treat. Oral histories collected by the Federal Writers Project describe it appearing again and again in the accounts of city families who lost everything, a simple, dignified humiliation. Number 18, navy bean soup. A pound of dried navy beans cost about $7 in 1934. Soaked overnight, simmered for 3 hours with a ham hock or a soup bone borrowed from the butcher, sometimes just water and salt and a HD onion. Navy bean soup was the Depression's great equalizer. It fed families in every region, in every state, in every kind of household. The United States Senate has served bean soup every single day since 1903. The senators ate it because it was tradition. Millions of families ate it because it was all they had. Those two facts sit together in American history without resolving into anything comfortable. Number 17, milk toast. Toast a slice of bread. Place the toast in a bowl. Pour warm salted milk over it. This was the Depression-era sick meal. The convalescent supper, the thing given to children when they were unwell and when the family could afford nothing more. The warm milk softened the bread into something pale and yielding. Families who had eaten well their whole lives found themselves giving milk toast to sick children in cold apartments and feeling the particular shame of not being able to do better. More than any other dish on this list, milk toast is the taste of the Depression's cruelty against people who never saw it coming. Number 16, vinegar pie, eggless Sunday custard. No eggs, no butter, no fruit. Depression-era cooks across the Ozarks made pie from water, vinegar, sugar, and cornstarch. It was baked in a large crust into a custard that set up pale, wobbly, and sharp. It was served as dessert on Sundays, when dessert was otherwise impossible. Children remember the sting of vinegar softened by sugar, the way the custard trembled on the fork, the ceremony of it. A whole pie cost under 10 cents. Women who made vinegar pie were not pretending it was lemon custard. They were insisting that Sunday still meant something, that the Depression had not taken everything, an act of dignity disguised as pastry. Number 15, fried green tomatoes. Before the frost ended the garden season, families harvested every tomato that had not ripened, dredged them in cornmeal, and fried them in lard. At 3 to 4 cents a pound in season, tomatoes were one of the most affordable garden crops. Fried green tomatoes were sour, starchy, and hot from the pan. The technique mattered. Too thin a slice and they fell apart. Too thick and the center stayed raw. The cornmeal crust had to be seasoned just right. The lard had to be hot enough to crisp without burning. Women passed that technique between generations the way other families pass money. The knowledge was all they